It's after midnight in a quiet suburb. You've been in a car accident, you're dazed, bleeding, disoriented. The one thing you want is help. A phone, a safe place. You spot a house with its lights off, but you knock anyway. You think, surely someone will open the door. Instead of help, you're met with the barrel of a shotgun. That was the tragic reality for Renisha McBride, a 19-year-old black woman from Detroit whose desperate search for assistance ended in her death on a stranger's porch in Dearborn Heights, Michigan. Her story is one of racial tension, fear, and split-second decisions that changed lives forever. But as investigators dug deeper, they didn't just find the obvious. They uncovered secrets about Renisha's personal life, conflicting witness statements, and motives that cast shadows far beyond a single gunshot. And the question that still lingers, would her killer have opened the door if she looked different? It was November 2nd, 2013. Renisha McBride had been at a friend's house earlier in the evening. Like many 19-year-olds, she was restless, social, full of energy, but at some point that night, she got into her car and drove. What happened next was pieced together later. Renisha's car crashed into a parked vehicle in Detroit. It was around 1 a.m. Witnesses described her as disoriented after the accident. Instead of waiting for help, she wandered away from the crash scene. Hours passed. Where she went during that gap, no one fully knows. Did she knock on other doors? Did she wander the streets in confusion? Was she afraid of getting into trouble? What we do know is that around 4:30 a.m., Renisha ended up on the porch of a house in Dearborn Heights, a predominantly white suburb bordering Detroit. That house belonged to Theodore Wafer, a 54-year-old airport worker. Wafer lived alone in a modest home on a quiet street. At that hour, most of his neighbors were asleep. According to his later testimony, Wafer was startled by loud banging on his doors and windows. He described it as aggressive, like someone was trying to break in. But what Renisha wanted was help. Instead of calling 911, Wafer retrieved his shotgun. He opened his front door, and within seconds, he fired. The bullet struck Renisha in the face. She collapsed on his porch, dead, 19 years old, shot for knocking. When police arrived, Wafer claimed it was self-defense. He insisted he feared for his life, thinking someone was breaking into his home. But here's the catch. Renisha was unarmed. She was not inside his house. She was a teenager who'd just been in a car accident. Why didn't Wafer call 911? Why open the door if he was so afraid? And why was the safety off his gun, finger on the trigger? The case immediately drew comparisons to Trayvon Martin, who'd been killed just a year before in Florida. Both young, both black, both unarmed, both killed in neighborhoods where they were seen as suspicious. Investigators began piecing together Renisha's final hours. Toxicology reports showed she had alcohol and marijuana in her system. Her blood alcohol level was 0.218, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. This raised another layer of complexity. Was she simply intoxicated and confused when she knocked on Wafer's door? Or was there more to why she ended up there? Police initially considered it might have been a random act of violence, a drunk teen knocking on the wrong house at the wrong time. But as they delved deeper, whispers emerged. Renisha's personal life wasn't without complications. Friends describe her as fun-loving, but also struggling, caught between adulthood and teenage recklessness. Some suggested she'd been hanging with people who weren't always good for her. Investigators began asking, was Wafer the only person responsible for her death? Or had the events leading up to it put her on a dangerous path? Detectives interviewed friends who were with Renisha earlier that night. Some revealed she'd been drinking heavily, frustrated after a fight. Others hinted at tensions in her circle, jealousies, rivalries, and choices that put her in risky environments. One friend admitted Renisha had been running from something that night. But what? This secrecy created an unsettling picture. While Wafer had pulled the trigger, the question of how Renisha ended up at his door at 4:30 a.m. remained unanswered. Did she know someone in that neighborhood? Was she targeted and chased before reaching Wafer's home? Or was it truly random? Theories swirled. But what never changed was a fact. She needed help. Instead, she was met with death. In 2014, Theodore Wafer went on trial. The courtroom was tense, divided along racial lines. The prosecution argued. Renisha was unarmed. Wafer could have called 911. He chose to open the door and confront her with lethal force. The defense countered. Wafer was awakened in the middle of the night. The banging was so loud and forceful, he thought his home was under attack. He shot in fear, not hate. But prosecutors exposed contradictions. Why open the door if you're terrified? Why not stay locked inside and call police? The jury deliberated for days. In the end, Wafer was convicted of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and a gun crime. He was sentenced to 17 to 32 years in prison. Justice, in the legal sense, was served. But in the court of public opinion, the wounds ran deeper. For Renisha's family, the verdict was bittersweet. Her mother sobbed in court, saying she was seeking help, and instead she got a bullet. My daughter's life mattered. But for others in Dearborn Heights, the case exposed a darker truth. A young black woman in distress was not seen as someone in need. She was seen as a threat, and that perception cost her life. This case raises haunting questions. What if Renisha had been white? Would Wafer have hesitated before pulling the trigger? What if she had knocked on another door? Would someone else have helped her instead of shooting? What if Wafer had just called 911, as most people would? The tragedy is that none of these questions will ever be answered. While the media painted the story as straightforward, drunk teen, scared homeowner, the truth is layered. Renisha was 19. She was flawed, human, vulnerable. She had her struggles, but she also had her future. And on that night, she needed compassion. Instead, she met fear. The case of Renisha McBride wasn't just about one girl and one man. It tapped into something bigger in America. The collision of race, fear, and split-second choices. To some, Wafer was a man protecting his home. To others, he was an embodiment of racial paranoia, the fear of a black body on a white porch. Renisha's death is now part of the long, painful list of names used in conversations about racial injustice. And each time we revisit her story, we are forced to ask, do we value all lives equally? Or do fear and prejudice continue to dictate who is seen as worthy of help and who is seen as a threat? Renisha McBride went out that night never imagining her life would end on a stranger's porch. She knocked on a door seeking help. She left that porch in a body bag. And while her killer sits behind bars, the larger questions remain unanswered. Would Theodore Wafer have opened the door or held his fire? If Renisha McBride looked different, or was this truly self-defense, or a deadly reflection of America's racial fears?